In 2019, a team of 16 soldiers assigned to the U.S. Army's High Altitude Warfare Training Unit embarked on a challenging 3-month expedition to summit Makalu, the 5th highest mountain peak in the world. Having departed from Fort Bragg, North Carolina 6 weeks earlier, the team was now conducting joint training exercises with Nepalese forces as part of Operation Mountain Shield, bilateral program designed to enhance high-altitude combat capabilities. While they were resting at a waypoint called Sherpani Kol to conduct high-altitude acclimatization before continuing on to the Makalu base camp, they stumbled upon something quite unexpected near their campsite, something that would make their blood run colder than the freezing weather had managed to. It was footprints, massive footprints in the snow. The question remains unanswered, however. Are these footprints newly discovered evidence of a creature that has eluded mankind for centuries? This is the story of the American Army and the Yeti. The U.S. Army Mountaineering Team's 2019 expedition to Mount Makalu, which began on February 15th, had first set out from their base in North Carolina. Similar expeditions to this one have been conducted by the U.S. military for decades as part of specialized mountain warfare training programs. These ventures serve multiple purposes: enhancing soldier readiness for operations in extreme environments, fostering international military cooperation, and maintaining America's edge in high-altitude combat scenarios. Given the increasing focus on potential conflicts in mountainous regions across the globe, from Afghanistan to the Caucasus, the U.S. Army's Mountain Warfare School has expanded its training programs significantly. The constant evolution of global threats keeps American forces on high alert, requiring specialized units capable of operating in the world's most challenging terrains. The Army's high-altitude teams are therefore among the most rigorously trained soldiers for extreme elevation warfare. Beyond training their personnel for combat proficiency in harsh conditions, each successful expedition serves to build esprit de corps throughout their ranks, nurturing the spirit of adventure and excellence among each new generation of American armed forces. The team expedition in the winter of 2019 was led by Major Robert Bull Thompson and comprised 6 officers, 3 senior NCOs, and 7 enlisted specialists. On March 8th, after arriving at the Himalayan foothills and linking up with their Nepalese counterparts, the joint team began their journey towards the Makalu base camp. 10 days later, on March 18th, while traversing through a narrow valley of the Makalu Barun National Park, the team paused at the 4,700-meter elevation mark, a waypoint called Sherpani Kol, to acclimatize their bodies to the increasing altitude and conduct equipment checks. While establishing their camp, members of the team exploring the surrounding area stumbled across something startling: a series of huge, mysterious footprints trailing through the hardened snow near their campsite. Using their available measurement equipment, they determined that the largest of these footprints measured 33 inches long by 16 inches wide, more than 3 times the size of an average man's boot print. They couldn't help but notice that although scattered, tracks of these footprints appeared to fall in a linear fashion, as if the creature that made them had the ability to walk upright, with the length of each stride being as long as 5 feet. By comparison, the average soldier's stride length while walking is roughly half that distance. The American soldiers knew that whatever made these footprints was massive. This marked the first time footprints in such large numbers had been documented by a U.S. Army expedition team, although perhaps not unexpectedly. Over the past 2 centuries, many of the strange findings attributed to this creature called the Yeti were discovered by military personnel, both American and British soldiers who, after leaving military service, continued their passion as rugged outdoorsmen, and many of whom served as expedition team leaders in various Himalayan ventures. Along with these dozens of documented cases, the breathtaking landscape of the Makalu Barun National Park, where the 2019 expedition team was trekking, is evidently no stranger to these sorts of findings. Massive footprints and even reported but unverified claims of the creatures themselves being sighted by locals and explorers. Skeptics have often attributed these kinds of tracks to the Himalayan brown or black bear. Attempts to sample hair or skin samples found in the region, presumed to be Yeti evidence, have also cast doubt on the existence of the Yeti, as the majority of these samples have ultimately turned out to be from local bears or mountain goats. However, Himalayan bears have a lumbering 4-legged gait that does not seem to align with the appearance of the tracks that the Army mountaineering team found. At least some of these highly trained soldiers believe the tracks to be something else entirely. And these are men who are certainly not unfamiliar with the appearance of local animal tracks, including those of bears. By comparison, the footprints of Himalayan bears are easily identifiable. Their tracks are distinguishable as being made by pawed feet, not to mention the distinctive marks left by their characteristic claws. Whether all of these American soldiers truly believe in the folklore of the Yeti or not, finding such large footprints of an unknown creature so close to their campsite could not have been a comforting discovery to have on their minds before settling in for the night. Despite contemporary skepticism, there was once a time when the Western world was fascinated by stories about the Yeti, so much so that the American Department of State issued specific guidance about the elusive creature to the American Embassy in New Delhi, India. A classified dispatch dated November 30th, 1959, states the following regulations. A royalty of 5,000 rupees must be paid to His Majesty's Government of Nepal for a permit to carry out an expedition in search of the Yeti. In case a Yeti is located, it may be photographed or captured alive, but it must not be killed or shot except in an emergency arising out of self-defense. All photographs taken of the animal, or the creature itself if captured alive or dead, must be surrendered to the government of Nepal at the earliest opportunity. News and reports concerning the actual existence of the creature must be submitted to the government of Nepal as soon as they are available and must not be given out to the press or reporters for publicity without permission from the government of. Now we fast forward to 2019, hoping to be taken seriously by the media and scientific community. The U.S. Army posted evidence of their findings through official channels, hoping to provoke public interest and a thorough scientific investigation into these strange tracks. As might have been expected, much of the world's media responded to this story with mockery and incredulity. But is there some credibility to the existence of this creature? The evidence suggests there might be. For as long as European and American travelers have ventured into Tibet and the extensive Himalayan region, locals have repeated to them legends of a huge ape-like creature. The earliest reference dates back nearly 200 years to 1832, when B.H. Hodgson, the British resident at the court of Nepal, mentioned that native hunters had been frightened by a wild man covered in long dark hair. More than half a century later, in 1889, Scottish explorer and military surgeon Major Lawrence Waddell was climbing the Himalayas at an elevation of 17,000 feet near Sikkim, when he too came across huge footprints in the snow. His local guides told him these were the tracks of a creature called the Yeti, a ferocious creature. They explained, one quite likely to attack human beings and even carry them off for food. The best way to escape it, they said, was to run downhill, for the Yeti had such long hair that it would fall over its eyes and blind it when going downhill. Like Major Waddell, we would come to know this creature as the Yeti, a term local to Central Asia. But residents throughout the continent call it by different names. Meat or man bear, Almas in Russia and Mongolia, meaning wild people, and Medokangmi, which translates roughly to the filthy snowman. Indeed, far from being confined to the Indian-Nepalese border where the U.S. Army discovered the prints in 2019, legends about this creature are known throughout practically all mountainous regions within the entire continent of Asia. Purported sightings have been noted, from the Caucasus Mountains in the far west of Asia to the Himalayas in the south, from the Pamir Mountains that lie just north of Afghanistan to the far eastern tip of Russia, a span of 4,500 miles. In short, the widespread skepticism of the Western world still falls on deaf ears among locals who reside in and around these mountainous areas of Asia. They remain unbothered by the disbelief of foreign people who reject their testimony yet have never set foot in their territory. Of course, there are many accounts of similarly described creatures throughout the modern world. The rock apes of Southeast Asia, the mapinguari of South America, the Sasquatch, or Bigfoot, of North America. As with our continued belief in decades of reported encounters with these similarly reclusive, bipedal, hominid-type creatures, local beliefs in the legendary creature called Yeti cannot be dissuaded merely due to a lack of concrete evidence. For the locals, the simple truth is that the evidence of this creature is hidden in the mountains. Local legends of the Yeti may date back centuries, perhaps thousands of years before European contact, considering these legends were certainly passed down by word of mouth. But for those of us living in Western society, the story of the Yeti is merely a century old. The legend of the abominable snowman became mainstream news beginning in 1921, when sightings of the creature were reported by the British Mount Everest reconnaissance expedition. The team, led by Colonel Charles Howard Berry, was making the first serious attempt on the north face of Everest when they discovered a set of unusual tracks. The colonel initially thought they were probably those of a large gray wolf. However, when the men were just 7 kilometers from the north face of Everest, while moving through the Lakpala Pass at an elevation of 22,470 feet, believing themselves alone in the desolate region, his team was startled to witness several large, dark figures moving in the distance. Their dark outlines were highlighted against the heavy snowfall. Tibetan porters were quick to assure the colonel that those creatures were clearly not wolves, but something called yetis. In 1925, there was Nikolaos Tombazi, a Greek photographer who, on a British geological expedition, apparently sighted a yeti while trekking along the largest glacier in the eastern Himalaya, the Zimu Glacier in Sikkim, India. He swore he nearly managed to photograph what he described as a naked, upright creature. His porters had called him from his tent and pointed to something several hundred yards away. Tombazi could see the figure was human-like and walking upright. It was dark in color and appeared to be wearing no clothing. This strange being was walking from one rhododendron bush to another, rummaging through the bushes and occasionally uprooting them. After the figure was visible for about a minute, Tombazi lost sight of it as it walked off into thick scrub. Camera equipment at that time was obviously much more cumbersome, and the creature had vanished by the time he managed to ready his lens. A decade later, in 1937, another famous climber of the interwar period, Frank Smythe, was exploring the remote regions of Tibet when he too saw strange tracks, large prints in the snow with an animal stride of at least 2 feet, similar to a man's full stride. But what kind of man with such large feet would be walking barefoot in the snow? Following this track, Smythe was astounded by the path they took. This creature could cross gullies and glaciers like an expert climber. His notes and findings were examined by the Zoological Society and the Natural History Museum, but were dismissed as being the prints of some unknown species of bear. Smythe accepted this conclusion, and certainly the appearance of the prints from his photographs do seem to reasonably match those of a 4-legged bear. Also during 1937, during a clash with Japanese forces, a Soviet reconnaissance unit in Mongolia reportedly spotted 2 silhouettes coming down a hill toward them. When the figures did not respond to challenges to identify themselves, the Russian sentries shot them. The next morning, the recon unit was quite surprised when they examined the bodies. They were described as being strange, anthropoid apes about the size of a man and covered with long, reddish hair. Unfortunately, because of the war, the bodies could not be returned to Moscow for proper evaluation. During the remainder of World War II, refugees, soldiers, and prisoners of war seem to often report seeing this creature called the Alma. In his book The Long Walk, Slavomir Rawicz tells the story of his escape from a Siberian labor camp and mentions being delayed by a pair of Almas. In another instance, Chinese soldiers reportedly put out food for an Alma and then watched it eat. In 1948, a Russian geologist was prospecting in Central Asia in the Tian Shan Mountains. One morning he awoke to cries from his guides that the horses were being stolen. Stone grabbed his rifle and headed outside to find a figure standing by the horses. It had long, reddish hair all over its body. The creature took off when Stone began shouting, and he chased after it. But the animal was so manlike, he later explained, that he couldn't bring himself to shoot it, and the creature escaped. Stories and rumors like this continued to leak back from the mountainous regions of Asia into newspapers and journals, always with that slight element of doubt which made it easy for serious minds to dismiss these stories as lies or cases of mistaken identity. But not all of the photographs of strange footprints coming back from the Himalayas could easily be explained away as bear tracks. Western media interest in the existence of the Yeti would be stirred once again after the end of World War II by men who were regarded as highly credible, leading members of scientific expeditions who could have no possible motive for fabricating evidence, and whose testimony was considered far more sensational because it was backed up by team members, including respected surgeons and scientists, and because the photographs they took were undeniably bizarre. The discovery made by Major Thompson's team in 2019 represents just the latest chapter in this ongoing mystery. Whether skeptic or believer, The fact remains that highly trained military personnel, men whose careers depend on accurate observation and reporting, continue to encounter evidence that defies easy explanation in some of the world's most remote locations. The footprints found at Sherpani Col, like those discovered by their predecessors over the past century, serve as a reminder that despite our technological advances and scientific understanding, the world's highest places still hold secrets that challenge our assumptions about what creatures might inhabit the most isolated corners of our planet. For now, the mystery endures, preserved in photographs, eyewitness accounts, and the steadfast beliefs of those who call these mountains home. And somewhere in the snow-covered peaks of the Himalayas, the truth, whatever it may be, continues to elude us, leaving only massive footprints as evidence of its passage through our world.